we have interesting ones, and other people may be interested in those conversations as well. And so if you're watching this, this is going to be an interesting conversation. I guarantee it. Anyway,
Oh, for sure.
but so let's do some quick intros.
Oh,
I can start because I'm the oldest.
Sure.
Um, we went to an event tonight with a whole bunch of old people who are called a friendship club. And one of the couples there I know quite well, and they were moving their chairs around so that we could sit with them. And I said, no, no, don't do that because we've been invited to this other table and I need to cross-fertilize. What?
That
that
sounded
wasn't really an
intro.
intro, but
Oh,
that's
what do you
that's
want?
Who
that's
are
Gary
you?
Berteig. That's his
Doesn't matter.
studio. He's a Canadian painter, and
There you go. What happened to
he's
my phone? It's gone. It's been back to
He,
the
he's
house.
also an old person.
Yeah, amongst others.
Yeah.
and that's Mishkin
Yeah.
Berteig, Gary Berteig's eldest son, and this is Alexei Berteig, the second son.
Yeah.
And I am Gary Berteig, who was my dad's oldest son.
Mishkin is a Scrum coach and
No,
Agile.
no.
Want to
No.
introduce yourself?
Yeah, I do. So I'm so because actually I have a new way of introducing myself, which I've been testing out with real audiences that have actually been quite fun and responsive.
You're
So
as bad as dad. Just get to
yeah.
it.
So my name is Mishkin Berteig. I have ADHD. I have autism. And to make it even worse, I have a high IQ, which makes me intolerably insufferable, pedantic, precise, and really annoying sometimes. But it also means that I think fast, see patterns, and help organizations do the same. And that's my main career, but I'm also a software person and yeah, there you go. And I sometimes am interesting, but I hope to be a lot in these conversations because what this person told me is that that person, Alexi, is doing some really cool work in seeing patterns with um, therapeutic
Methodology.
modalities,
Yeah,
methodologies
yeah.
in talk therapy. I don't know if that's the category or not. Is that the
Yeah, you could
category?
call it, yeah, you could
Yeah.
call it talk therapy. Psychotherapy is the massive umbrella term. Um, it includes talk therapy, counseling. They call it the helping professions because it's
Okay.
about basically
Yeah.
walking with people through something.
Yeah. And this person, Gary Berteig, has been doing something similar with, let's call it visual therapy as an artist. It's not officially therapy, but
It's
often,
education and
yeah, often
transformation. Yeah.
inspiring and transforming people. And um, we know this as his sons because we keep seeing it happen. And then also, I do that with organizations instead of individuals.
So let me finish my own introduction other
Yeah.
than my name. I was 20 years a filmmaker, and during that 20 years, the projects that I valued the most were ones where the project became a mirror for individuals or communities, whether it was a mirror for myself or for family or for a First Nations community or for a company that just simply wanted some sort of um, corporate interior promotion, and yet there is something really profound about the way that storytelling could function as a mirror where people can regard themselves and learn something and consolidate a sense of identity, sometimes individually, but also sometimes collectively. And uh, I left the film industry to study to become a counselor. And that means doing a degree in psychology and training and practicum and all kinds of other things. And I've been very interested in how all the different modalities and about a couple hundred years of history of study of human behavior, thinking, and emotion, how it all has some really, really common ingredients. There's a lot of truths out there, a lot of really hard won truths, tons of research, tons of incredibly rigorous research. And yeah, so I have a theory about what are the inherent uh, pieces of the human being that everybody is actually talking about. And what are those things that we have that are natural powers or capacities that allow us to learn and change? So the way that I resolve 20 years of filmmaking with my new current focus is that for the entire time I was working in the film industry and for the entire time I was doing any form of service or friendship, I was a catalyst character in people's lives. So, in narrative speak, that's kind of a particular function. It's not the hero of the story, it's the catalyst for change. Because I kept meeting people on the crossroads over and over and over and over again, and sometimes ridiculously so. So, anyway, Mishkin, what you're doing is actually quite similar. You're a catalyst within organizations where you parachute in and help them to reconstitute a sense of identity, plan, change, grow, develop. And Dad, you've been doing much the same thing through your art by turning artwork into a community project, for example, in schools or within First Nations communities or what have you. So there's something quite similar about the way that we're approaching our work.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention something about the fact that we've all been interested in this for a very long time. That like I remember 30 years ago when Dad, you were doing just getting started at Keano College as the, you know, art and media department, whatever it was called. Um, you had, for example, Blade Runner and the question, what is it to be human, as a really core exploration in your media class. And it's literally one of the very few things I remember about what you did as an instructor. And um the like Alexei, you've taught me the framework of the hero's journey, that story structure, which interestingly has become a very powerful mechanism in the work that I do with organizations. And anyway, it's just this kind of really interesting connection of these really core themes.
Okay, now it's my turn. Okay, I'm going to just mention that what is human has been exactly what you say. It really, really cracked the shell on a lot of people. And the other thing is that I realized I wasn't teaching art in the sense of craft or skill or, theory. I was teaching inspiration ultimately. And inspiration for me has always been centered in love because the love between the work you do and yourself and others who are nearby attempting the same things is catchy. It's
Hmm.
amazing how catchy it is and how that is in effect the role of a mentor, if you want to call it that, or an individual who cares and has stories to tell and ways of bringing things into focus that otherwise are beyond the physical. And to me, that's what most people are really, really interested in. If
Hmm.
you ask them about something that is about themselves that is not physical, then you're onto something. And I gave a talk in
Well, hold on a second.
yeah, okay. Sorry.
Alexei did ask me if I lost weight, and it made me very interested.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay,
just
so
yeah.
outside of Denver, I gave a talk to this highly whatever kind of organization that was all about communication systems. And it was so highly rigorously cared for that they had people coming with me to the washroom so I wouldn't spill any beans. So anyway, I told them the story of the blue nose and how this girl I really had fallen in love with when I was in grade seven. Uh, I made an absolutely perfect rendition of the blue nose out of a fence post with sails and everything painted and so on. And when I found out that she was going steady with another guy, I said to this friend of mine, well, let's go sail this thing on the van. And the next day, by myself, I held the blue nose in my hands and I thought, why is this the most beautiful thing I've ever made as a boat? And the voice came in my chest that it was because you made it for love. And that seemed to strike such a chord in that group of people. There were probably about 40 or 50 people in that audience that the woman who invited me there said they never forgot it. They constantly referred to that story because it's something that gets into your bones, kind of like a good instrument, of the tone of a good instrument. It's like the attar of roses. It sticks with you. So that's what I'm trying to do. And collaboration with young people or First Nations people or with people that we were working with in doing the videos, it's all about that kind of thing. There's something beyond just the information. It's about communication, the commune of and exchanges. The relationships are really significant.
So I want to just quickly point out that, in terms of working as a painter with students, a lot of what you're dealing with is metaphor.
Yep.
And you've now mentioned love. And Mishkin, you already mentioned narrative. And those are three of the five spiritual faculties that I believe are really the keys to how we interact in this world and learn, grow, develop, change, transform. Because basically, you're talking about processes that are meaningful and also pertain to identity, like that question of who am I in this world? How do I relate to others? What am I here for? All of that stuff, all the big existential questions. So to me, it's love, it's the capacity for self-reflection, self-knowledge, it's the capacity for perception, which is to investigate the mysteries of the world and the mysteries of reality, metaphor and narrative. Those are the five. And I think those explain everything that I can see in the world of psychology about how people. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, okay. So what's the like with a list of five, I have to usually repeat it to really get it. And is there an order to those five just before you get into like does the order matter
Yeah,
basically?
it does a little bit. So, love is the first uh, sensation. It's the first thing that we know when we come into this world. It's the bond with mom, bond with dad, bond with siblings. That's the first thing we know. And it's the conduit for knowledge, understanding who we are. And if that's interrupted in some way, if that's distorted in some way, it has lifelong impacts. There's not a shred of doubt about it. In fact, if that first mode of operating in this world is interrupted, it can shorten your lifespan by 10 years. Just boom, right off the bat. It's so fundamental to how we operate. I have to say, though, that kind of immediately makes this about more than just what's going on for the individual. It's about how we connect with others. So, love. And then the second one would probably be self knowledge. So I call it the self educative property. And this comes again from the world of painting and art, where we have an autobiographical relationship with the world around us. When I meet another person in a very real way, I am in them and they are in me. And I perceive that. In another way, if I have 100 students make a mark on a page, just one single mark, every single one of them is going to be different. And every single one of them is going to be reflective of the reality of that person in some way. It's a very small reflection. It's not a very deep reflection, but it still reflects each individual. So we have this through dreams, through intuition, through self insight, through, you know, owning up to something, through being honest with ourselves. We have this capacity to grow and change. So that's the self educative property. It's probably second. Again, that's the moment where the child becomes self aware. I'm distinct as an individual. And then the third would probably be perception. So the capacity to read the reality of the world around you through your senses, but also in other ways too, like through intellectual knowledge, through mathematics, science, art, etc. And then narrative and metaphor, they're separate, but they kind of go hand in hand. So
So is
those
that
are the
four
two.
and five, or is that just
That's
four?
four and five.
Okay,
Yeah.
narrative and
And
then
if you think
metaphor. Okay.
about it, those are the things that are necessary for language.
Hmm.
Without narrative, so the ability to do cause and effect sequences or to understand leaps, like little leaps between concepts, you don't get stories, you don't get language, you don't get lessons, you don't get consequences for actions, you don't get anything. You have to have that. And then metaphor goes very similar with that. Word forms and sounds standing in for concepts. Like it's so wild. And then that extends all the way down to the deepest spiritual learning, like to understand that in some way love is like a river. There's a lot of ways love could be like a river, but you know those comparisons between tangible. There's a technical term for the thing, which is the object of the metaphor, and then what the extended meaning is. But basically, you have one thing that is experiential standing in for something that's abstract or intangible. And holy cats, do we ever have a lot to know and understand? Is that the
So
book?
Yeah, this is this book that I've just started rereading. Darn
It's
Zoom.
backwards, you know.
Okay, no, it's not. So it's called Surfaces and Essences by Douglas Hofstadter and Emmanuel Sander. And the subtitle is The Analogy as the Fuel and Fire of Thinking. And it's like a really beautiful, deep exploration of this particular concept.
Concept metaphor,
Yeah.
right?
Metaphor,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I wanna give some feedback, kind of to Alexei's comments here. Just the mark on a piece of paper individuals make. That's one of the things I did in Switzerland with students with color and memory. And they just used their fingers to put colors on a piece of paper, 20 colors, and black and white, 22 colors in total. And then their memories were written down by the name of the color, and they put them up on a wall, and they were all different, really, really different. And then when they revealed the memories that associated with each color, we ended up with a very, very strongly bonded set of people. There were about 15 people in that group. And everyone was from a different country, a different place, Africa, China, United States, European countries. And it was like magic had happened in terms of the collaboration that happened between them. And to me, that's one of the features of doing these kind of activities that are so central to human creativity and yet have never really been identified in such a way that they can be useful.
So
And the usefulness is community
so
and culture.
but okay, but is that connected to metaphor because you're
Yeah.
basically getting people to connect a color metaphorically to a memory? Is that the
It's a specific memory, but in its telling, it becomes a narrative and it becomes metaphorical. Is there is no obvious relationship between a color and a story.
okay?
So it is a kind of combination of a variety of these particulars Alexi's pointing at as the five elements. So I think that some of these things are like on a trip to with this other artist friend of mine. I was talking to him and I suddenly realized that if I have any identity as an artist, one of the most important is my experience and propagation of collaboration.
Hmm.
And it's really, really exciting, actually.
Okay, so
That
Yeah,
but
I want to
but
just
that's team building.
yeah. So by the way, those five things, they don't get expressed, as you can quickly see, they don't have any mode of expression except in connection with others.
Yeah,
So
right.
this is, if you would think
Yeah.
of every person as an atom, these are the means by which we make molecules and connect with others and communicate and our
speaking of
being.
metaphors,
Yeah. Well, it's hard to describe these concepts
Yeah.
without them, right? But
yeah,
the
which I
sharing of
think
the story related to the memory, it so it externalizes the internal condition of the student. They now have an external object where they get to practice that self-educative function, where this thing that they've just done mirrors, and they also are connecting with others and telling a story. So you got metaphor, narrative, self-educative, perception, arguably, and love. Because yeah, I mean you've got the whole
Yeah.
gamut.
presumably at
Uh,
the very least they're picking a color that they love the
No,
color, but not,
not necessarily,
you
because
know.
they don't love all the colors to the
No,
same degree.
no, but the
They
one they pick themselves.
No, there's a
No,
set of colors. They all go
Okay.
through all the 20 colors.
Okay.
And
Okay, but
that's a specific
yeah, yeah,
exercise, okay?
yeah.
And then the other thing that Alexei was doing, which really got me excited, was to create a matrix of all of these existing methodologies for doing this in one way or another. And it's like the periodic table. Suddenly, what were initially atoms that are going to be metaphors because they are now another thing. They're not just bigger atoms. They are now a change of state and purpose. This is what I see inherent in Alexei's work right now to bring into focus the fact that there are these interrelationships potential, which is, for me, another aspect of how the Bob's 27 letters is active not just on physical levels, but on human levels, at the level of the heart, of the soul, of the spirit, and of our bodies. There's something very, very exciting about what Alexei's got up his sleeve.
Okay, so I have a question about this matrix that you've created. And I saw like I just had a quick visual of it in on Dad's computer
Sure.
screen. Do you have it handy?
Reasonably, I just want to drop in that like I'm looking at specifically psychotherapy and therapeutic modalities, and I believe, but cannot prove because I haven't tested it, that every single therapeutic modality over the last 100 years, the reason they work is because they access these five inherent capacities.
Okay, but they
So that's
access
the matrix that I wrote is what are the different modalities? How do they correlate to these five receivers, let's say, or I
their
call them faculties.
dimensions. Their
I'll stick
dimensions.
with faculties because they're like we think of sight and sound and smell as being like senses or faculties.
Yeah.
So so I think of them that way. Um, but anyway, so how they all use those five faculties, and then what are some typical interventions that would be used? So one would be journaling. There's a lot of therapeutic modalities that ask clients to start keeping a journal. It can be something very simple, but self-educative and narrative immediately, right? Um, Gestalt work like empty chair, role play, um, storytelling, just even the therapeutic relationship itself is characterized by what they call um, therapeutic love. It's not romantic love, it's total unconditional positive regard towards the client, it's non-judgmentalism, it's support, it's all of these different things that you would just really love to have from any friend. There's a really important book called The Heart and Soul of Change, and the authors are Duncan, Miller, Wampold, and Hubble. And they basically did this enormous study, and
Duncan,
they
Miller, Wampole, and
Hubble.
Hubble.
Hubble, and they basically are
It's like
they're
a law
arguing.
office. It's so great.
I know that they're arguing that every therapeutic modality of the last 50 years works, and they
Okay.
all seem to work about equally well.
Hmm.
But there are certain therapists or counselors who are always more effective. And so they wanted to kind of see what is the common factors.
Hmm.
So that was their approach. Let's identify the common factors that exist in the therapeutic relationship that seem to determine way beyond modality the outcomes. And they found, for example, that if you take the overall effect, like who gets better, it could be addiction. Let's say addictions counseling. All right. Who recovers? Well, it turns out about 40% of the effect is just the relationship.
Hmm.
About 40% is client, or sorry, I think it's 30% is client factors. Like it could be what is their living situation, what is
Hmm.
their family support, financial constraints. It's all that stuff, which you don't really have any control over. 10% is just sort of unknown, and then 5%, whatever is left over, is the modality. So the modality only counts for 5% of the total impact of therapy. So as a counselor, you have control over maybe 35, 40, 45% of what's going on just by establishing a relationship and then using a modality appropriately. But
Okay,
it's
so yeah,
yeah,
so I want to ask about that because like there's a few different things that when you talk about these five faculties, what immediately comes to my mind is a five-dimensional space, which
sure.
it's basically like each each therapy actually it's a 10-dimensional space. I'll explain in a moment. Okay, so each therapy is going to have let's call it like a different level of emphasis in each of those five faculties.
They do, in fact. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a therapist, your skill is going to be different in each of those five.
Yep.
And the person in therapy, in that therapeutic relationship, is
Is
also
going to be
going to,
more or less receptive to different.
that's
Exactly.
right. So it becomes 5 by 5, which is it's a 10-dimensional state space. But anyway, the point is that like it's something where you can at least potentially position like consciously
As soon as you're
position.
aware of it, you can take it into consideration and
Yeah.
you can analyze what's actually going on
Yeah.
and use
And
it or not. Yeah.
and can you predict?
And predict theoretically. So if it has validity, then it should have some predictive power, which I don't know yet. But
Yeah, like that study that you were mentioning, the lawyer names. Um
yeah, heart and soul of change. Yeah.
yeah, heart and soul of change.
Common
Um
factors.
yeah, so
Yeah.
they looked at common factors, and one of the things about a common factor analysis is that they're looking for the biggest predictors, but there's there's also like a multi-factor, multivariable analysis that would look for relationships between factors that might point to some different results. For example,
Yeah, well, that's what they started to do with this idea that it seems like the establishment of the relationship, the therapeutic relationship, is this really big factor. And then if you are not very good at establishing that relationship with your clients, you could be the most qualified practitioner of cognitive behavioral therapy the world has ever seen, but the effect you'd be having is reduced because you haven't established congruence. Hold on.
yeah,
Is that a
I've got a
bird?
bird.
yeah,
Just a
you've
sec.
got a bird. Can you share the bird?
No.
It's okay. I just closed the door.
Bird,
You
bird,
you
bird.
just
Have you
silenced
heard?
you
Bum,
silenced the
bum,
bird.
bird.
Yeah. Can I
Huh.
just say though, just to skip over some of this, the thing that potentially is really exciting to me is that as soon as you start talking about individual change, you start going, well, what about community change? So, like a dyad
Yeah.
of therapist and client is one community, but is very small. Family therapy starts to involve the whole family. Um, but there are institutions or organizations that I wonder if the change agents are similar. Like, does a company have those same faculties in some collective sense, and can they be harnessed in the same way? And that I don't know.
Yeah, so
And this is the
absolutely.
periodic table thing that I see in Alexei's thing. It's like the periodic table just pointed to, here's these empty squares in this whole thing. What you can probably predict what you're looking for.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been finding kind of useful recently is to think about like to have a little bit of clarity about what we mean by community versus institution. And I think individual is pretty obvious, right? Like there's a singular human involved in change, but then like I'm writing a very long essay about something similarly related, but I'm not going to get into it right now. And I love this phrase from this book called Imagined Communities by Benedict Anderson. No, sorry, Imagined. It's not Imagined Communities, is it?
Imaginary communities.
No, it's not imagined. Anyway,
Okay.
it doesn't matter. Imagine communities, and the core concept is that people imagine, believe themselves to be part of a greater group of people, but that the boundary is fuzzy. It's imagined in the sense that there's no defining characteristic. And then institutions are defined groups where the boundary is clear, right? Like a company either has someone as an employee or they're not an employee. And there's a very clear boundary about are you in or are you out? And so to me, community is a fuzzy boundary system where and but it's still a system that interacts outside of itself as well, just like an individual does. And also like a defined group is also something. Now, hold on. I know you want to talk, but I want to get back to the question that Alexi asked originally, which is, does this exist as a useful set of five in communities slash organizations? And I think the answer is a very, very simple yes. And specifically, so love in an organizational sense, love is primarily defined by, let's call it strength of purpose and vision. And so, like when we join an organization, like when we're hired on, for example, there's a bunch of different motivators that people have in play. Of course, financially, if it's a job, but fundamentally, when I work with organizations, probably effectiveness factor number one, same position as what you're talking about, love, is about how how inspired people are or attracted they are to the vision of the organization itself. Does this inspire me? Does this draw on my heartstrings? Does this make me want to sacrifice, to work hard, to be involved? Right. And some organizations are really terrible at that, creating that kind of environment. And some are really great at it. Um, and then, like the self reflective piece, um, again, very, very clear connection to how effective organizations are at understanding their own reality, whether and it's not just financial, it's also structural, it's process reality.
Honesty and truthfulness,
Yeah, exactly. And then the third one was no, sorry,
perception.
perception. Yeah, and so this is about sensing outside of the organization and knowing what's going on in the marketplace, whatever that is, the trends of the world, the culture that they work within,
Weather.
the all that kind of
Those
stuff.
ones are not so mysterious. I'm actually quite curious about narrative and
Yeah.
metaphor.
Yeah. So with narrative, actually, it's very powerful as well. This is the story the organization tells itself about how it got to where it is and where it's going. And that narrative can be incredibly powerful and incredibly blinding or empowering. And so like if the narrative of the organization is we got here because our CEO is a like heroic genius, that's a very different narrative structure for how that organization might advance versus we got here because everyone pulled together through a crisis, or we got here because we were lucky and we keep getting lucky, or we got here because whatever, right? And that like in corporate culture um, analysis, like there's this guy who wrote a book called The Corporate Culture Survival Guide, Edgar Schein. Um, this is one of the biggest factors for the creation of culture in an organization is that
The
story.
story.
Yeah. Um, and so metaphor, that's the harder one, right? So because metaphor is so pervasive about the way everything works, the places where like because I work mostly in technology organizations, what I would say is that probably there's two places where metaphor really shows up. It's my Mac. It gives, anytime I do that high five, I can't remember how to get it to go, but eventually, no.
Can
Anyway,
I just say something here, which
but
has to do with the relationship between individuals, community, and institutions? Okay, just I mean, I know where your
I've
interest
got
is.
one more
One more
Yeah,
thing.
let him just finish because
One,
he's right at the end.
metaphor. Yeah. So okay, so in an organization, um, the product or service that an organization provides is the metaphor that connects the way that that organization exists into the outside world. It's not the only place for metaphor, but for example, like if you talk to people who are into product design, um, a lot of what they talk about is okay, we want to build this product and we have to create a way for people to quickly understand what its purpose is, what its value is, and how to engage it. And that's often through metaphors, right? So, iOS now has this, really cool looking liquid glass metaphor. And that's a really kind of trivial example, but, you know, 10 generations of iOS back, it was skeuomorphism, which is make everything look like the thing it is. A folder would look like a manila folder, for example. Um, and so the use of metaphor in organizations is primarily in how they present their products and services. That's the really obvious one for me. There might be lots of other ones, but that's what occurs to me for metaphor. Now,
well, okay.
your turn.
My thought as you're going along is there's this significant difference between men and women in the way that they perceive manners of purpose and of reality. What is a feeling versus a thought? So there's a lot of things that emerge out of communities where people are living together in a formal or informal way, which include things like types. Like there's hunters, there's leaders, there's storytellers, there's people who are good at medicine and prescriptions of the future. And there's also people who are good educators, like who do something that is valuable in immediate sense of bringing up kids. these are all things that are based in another set of birth and death and the relationships between men and women. And these often are the seedlings of specific types of organizational structures or administration, so that the chief has within his purview a number of maybe secret societies that are based entirely on hunters or warriors, and another chief whose main set of relationships are storytellers. So to me, this is what is an administrative institution? And humanity has been moving across so many varieties of administrative structures, including business, religion, and other features of creative processes, etc. And so it's not by accident that Baha'u'llah, through Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi, bring into a state of awareness a specific type of administration that is immune from corruption because of election cycles, the manner in which elections are maintained or developed. These are things that are valuable models for discussions like this about the relationship between individuals, communities, and administration. Because corporate people are like I've said this story before. I was asked to do the bylaws for a friendship center. I started and I couldn't continue because people were not of the same beliefs internally, and they were capable of lying to make it possible for them to take advantage. So I had to I had to say I can't do it. And that's what is the other side of the story to what you're describing, I think. So when people die in Fort McKay or other agents places where there's First Nations, they have a wake, and a wake can be a few hours in a white society, but 4 or 5 days in a First Nations community. It's like what is an administrative structure? Is it a wake? Is that a structure? Yes, it is.
Well, it's
But
it's
it's
a
not a decision maker.
no, but I think what you're talking about is okay. I'm not actually 100% sure, but I think what you're talking about is what I would categorize in terms of processes, which are part of a community. And the community is an imagined community in the sense that the boundaries aren't necessarily perfectly defined, or it's an institution where the boundaries are clearly defined. Like
Right.
that's just the language I'm using for now. It's not like the right definition. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to
I have a slightly different idea of what institutions might be, and that includes government, business,
yeah.
health authority, et cetera, et cetera. And that is, it's actually got a definition and an existence that stands quite independently of the people that are involved. So the institution of, here I live in Vancouver, the Fraser Health Authority, if they change half of their staff tomorrow, the Fraser Health Authority still exists as an entity
Yeah,
and
it's
an
the ship of
institution.
Theseus.
The what?
Ship of Theseus.
Is that a metaphor?
It is a metaphor, and it's also an interesting little mental model.
And the institution of marriage.
Well,
Yeah.
so sorry, I
Yeah, like your wife could come and go, and a new wife comes in, you still got a marriage.
yeah, so the ship of Theseus is just this idea that like there's this ship and it gets repaired. Some wood planks are changed, sail is changed, patched up,
At
etc.
some point, the whole thing is replaced, but
Exactly.
it's still the ship of Theseus. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And so I mean, to me, like it's almost irrelevant whether it is or isn't the ship of Theseus. What's important is that it has a defined boundary, that there's some things that are part of it and other things that are not part of it.
Or is it the shape,
No, it doesn't, it's
function?
not about shape or function. It's just that there is some boundary.
So I have a question, because you, like, even as we speak, I don't know if you can talk about it or not, but you're basically involved as a consultant with an organization, a company,
Yeah.
and this isn't your first rodeo. You're kind of one of those people that they call when they need to fundamentally change the way that they're operating or how they're working, identity. They need to learn something. They need to change.
Yeah.
It's this is all about transformation and change. So, um, sometimes those things are really practical and
Yeah.
they're procedural or they're, you know, no, you can't just have a fuzzy org chart. You need to actually decide what your org chart is or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, is there any practical value in looking at these kinds of dimensions? Because they
Yeah.
work for individuals, they work very well. Like, if you're talking to a CEO and how they might need to alter the way that they are interacting with others,
Yeah.
this paradigm works, but I don't know if it works, yeah,
So
system wide.
with the like aside from the fifth one, metaphor, which I'm still not 100% sure of, the other four absolutely. So again, I actually can't talk about anything specific about the organization I'm working on right now, but in generalities, um, they've asked me to come to help them improve productivity. Okay, so there's a couple things about that. We have to ask, why do they want to improve productivity? And there's going to be a story there. There's going to be a like a sort of expectation of cause and effect that if we bring in Mishkin, then we will get better productivity. Um, and with expectations about what I might or might not do with the organization. But as you said before, because I'm a catalyst, I don't always meet those expectations. I might do things differently or in ways that are disruptive enough that they don't like it, right? So so one of the things that I'm doing right now is that they are very clearly missing the the let's call it the structural components of what is required for my understanding of love in your system. So they have an absolutely fantastic vision or mission that when people join this organization, they are really excited about that. But it's you could call it almost like a really immature love in that it's like it's obvious, but it doesn't have a way of being practically applied day to day. And
It's
so what's
idealistic and doesn't require change or sacrifice.
um well, it's not that it doesn't require change or sacrifice, it's that it doesn't have a direction. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Okay. So so what they're missing fundamentally, and by the way, even some of the executives that I talk to don't agree with this. Okay. So just like, consultant caveat here, I could be wrong, but what they're missing is um, a the demonstration of that love in the way that they communicate with each other. And I'll be really specific about this. when they have meetings, for example, of which they have lots, or when they write documents, of which they write many, 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 there's always one thing missing, which is a statement of what they love, what they're trying to do, their their vision. I'm using the word strategy in their organization because if I talk about vision, they think they've already got it, which they do, just not the way I'm talking about it, which is something that's definite enough to provide direction. So the consequence is that um, they suffer from severe multiple personality disorder in my non-therapeutic judgment, right? Like, but basically they don't know where their head's at. They're constantly switching, sometimes almost like with whiplash rapidity between, oh, we have to do this. Oh no, no, we have to do that. Oh no, no, we have to do that. Oh, we've got to serve
I
that
have
client.
a different paradigm actually that
Yeah,
might be um, because this whole thing doesn't function by itself. It's
yeah,
also layered with this other piece, which is it comes out of humanistic psychology and modalities, which is the idea of um, self knowledge, then self acceptance, and then self actualization. So the self acceptance piece is huge in almost every form of change that is practiced in therapy. And there's this wonderful concept in Gestalt called the contradictory theory of change, which is the more you try to be something you're not, the more stuck you are. You have to accept what you are. And as soon as you have some ground underneath your feet and you're dealing with reality, you can start to make progress. You can start to do things. And so the self knowledge piece is a little bit of like, I think it's obvious that you have to have self knowledge before you can have self acceptance, or in parallel with it at the very least. And then self actualization is where the motivation is intrinsic instead of extrinsic. Um, you're in a learning mode. You're secure in what you are, so you're not threatened by outside ideas. You're not threatened by differences with others. You have some sense of purpose. So I've taken those three basic ones and said, okay, every modern writer about mental health is pointing at the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're talking about trauma or early childhood experience or grief and loss, addictions. It doesn't matter what field you're talking about. The protective factor is connection, and the danger factor is isolation. So if you take self knowledge and you say the corollary to that is other knowledge, and you take self acceptance and say the corollary is other acceptance, and then self actualization, the corollary is other actualization, which basically means, I think, being involved in the world and using your powers and strengths and abilities to advance civilization, to
yeah.
participate in society, and so on. So if a company does not accept the reality of the world, that would be a problem with other acceptance. And when you're experiencing other acceptance, you'll have this kind of polar switching where one minute you're in love with what things are, and then the next minute you reject what things are, and the next minute you love what things are, and so on and so forth. And that applies to other people, but it also applies to your external reality and not wanting to deal with it, or idealizing it to something that you wish it was instead of what it actually is. So I think that set of six is useful because it
Which
describes
set of, oh, okay, okay.
self
Yeah, yeah.
knowledge, other knowledge.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So if if a company is really stuck, or if a person is really stuck on self knowledge, you probably could make some progress by helping them investigate other knowledge
Right. Okay. Yeah.
because they're so related to each other. Like the more you know yourself, the more you know others. The more you accept yourself, the more you'll accept others,
And
etc.
to
And
some
vice
degree, vice
versa.
versa. Yeah.
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 So that's for dealing with stuck points. Like
Hmm.
a person really just doesn't like themselves very much, or a company doesn't like itself very much, or whatever, then you would explore other acceptance. You do work around what are some other places and what are some other people that you really, really do accept,
Yeah.
and what is it you accept about them, and why can you accept them as imperfect and flawed as they are, but you can't accept yourself, and then working around that type of stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
You're pretty deep into an organization if you're at that level.
yeah, there's, yeah. One of the things that I know from this being around the block business is that some organizations say they want to change, but don't actually, right? And as an outsider, I can detect that pretty fast. It is somewhat intuitive, right? It's like I'm not sure I could define it exactly. It's kind of like a vibe, but it shows up in a lot of ways, right? So, for example, like even if you just have a conversation with another human being, this is one of the things I love actually teaching about is there's this cognitive bias, which I'm not sure it's got a name exactly, or if it does, I don't know what the name is, but it's basically that people don't like taking advice. And so like if my dad, say, asks my advice about, I don't know, a painting or something like that. And if I give him advice about it, whether I'm right or wrong, there's a little twinge of resistance. And I'm not saying he would
It's
necessarily have it,
called,
but a lot of people do.
yeah, it's called counter will.
Okay, counter will. Cool. I'm glad there's a name for it. That's awesome. Even if they thought they were sincere in seeking advice, right? But actually, sometimes a lot people are just they don't want advice, they want affirmation. No, it's great, right? Like, I'm very careful about commenting on my wife's clothing when she asks me advice about it. you know, Very, very cautious. Tread carefully here. But it's okay. But then, so how, like, if someone wants to change, how do you help them? Because they've said they want to change, but they might not want advice, or they might have this counter will to advice.
Yeah. So generally speaking, if I can cut to the chase, nobody wants advice, not companies, not humans, not wives, not children, even if they directly ask for it, because you're getting into this intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation problem where people can only truly do what they need to do when they are inside their own problem and they are truly motivated to solve it. And you can't stand outside of your own painting or outside of your own problem and solve anything. You have to be completely inside of it. And the problem with advice is that it slightly deprives you of your autonomy and also can only ever be from an outside perspective, not an inside perspective. So um, I don't know how this works for organizations, but the way it works in counseling is really smart, which is you don't give advice, period. Like people can be begging you for advice and you still don't give advice. What you keep doing is using reflection. So, this self educative faculty. So, you just put up mirrors. Here's a mirror. Here's another mirror. Oh, you're turning over there. Here's another mirror. This is what you look like when you turn over there for solutions. This is what you look like when you ask for advice. This is what you look like. Anyway, and most people are pretty much just running around with bad hair and they keep asking their friends, what should I do about my hair? And everybody's trying to be helpful and they give advice. Oh, you should just pat it down. Oh, you should use this comb. Oh, you should blow dry it some more. And they keep trying to solve it. And then finally somebody comes along and says, here's a mirror. And the person goes, oh, I got it. I know exactly what I need to do. Because they're capable of that. And I suspect that you have found, working with organizations, that some of the best moments have been those aha moments where people see what they're in. Like they see it for the first time, maybe, and they go, aha, I know exactly what to do. And you can't stop them. They're running to go get it done.
That's coaching. That's
Yeah.
what we learned about coaching. Who's that lovely woman behind you?
Okay. And you guys
You
are
have to come. Yeah, you have to.
you guys are talking something serious?
Yes, and we're recording and we're going to publish this video and you're going to be in it. Seriously, which is awesome.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Because I'm about to do this. Okay, hold on.
She's about to give me some hair. Speaking of bad hair,
Yeah.
what should I do with my hair?
Oh,
What
that's
should I-
so awesome.
What should I just
You
don't
look
know.
great. Alexei, you look so fantastic. Wait till you see the video
Yeah,
of
and
your
then I'll
hair.
know.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh my gosh, really?
It's okay. It's fine.
Okay. So
It's not for anybody. It's just
Okay,
Well,
sorry.
okay. We may have to get her to sign a release.
yeah.
Um,
So here's the other thing about resistance is that in therapy anyway, you extend a massive amount of benefit of the doubt. Like the person did come for help, and that says a lot. And they didn't quit after the first session. That says a lot. And
or as a consultant, they didn't fire you after the first meeting.
exactly,
Right,
exactly.
yeah.
So if you're still there, they still want to change. And the resistance is just normal because it's really uncomfortable. And the problems you're familiar with are comfortable, and the problems you don't know about yet that are over the horizon are really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. So the five things though give you more than just the mirror. So I wanted to just point out that when someone asks for advice, and in my case, they're paying me for advice, not just to hold up a mirror. Okay. One of the challenges is to provide advice in a way that isn't subject to that counter will approach, and
Okay.
that's the narrative or
Okay,
the metaphor.
so love, you could say, all right, so you got a problem. What's good about this problem, and how does it get you what gets you out of bed in the morning in the first place to do this company, and how is that connected? Like you have to connect this
Yeah.
problem to that.
Yeah.
And then you could use love, and then you could use perception, and you can say, what is this problem showing you that you didn't know before? And then, narrative, you could say, tell me the story of how, like, if you could snap your fingers or you have a magic wand, what are you doing if this problem didn't exist? And all that stuff just is like really powerful kind of change talk,
Yeah.
and you don't get the resistance and stuckness,
Yep.
people are self-encouraging in a sense because they start talking about change in a positive way. They start talking about problems in a proactive and positive way. And then metaphor, like I'll, I'll tell you if this is the right time for it, I'll tell you an intervention or exercise that I dreamed up that I think has a lot of legs for working with metaphor. Can I tell you?
Yeah.
Okay. So this idea is how to work with people who are dealing with pretty deep self-esteem issues. That's a really tough nut to crack because encouragement just falls on deaf ears. They make bids. You find yourself making bids trying to encourage or build the person up. Oh, it's not that bad, or no, you're worth it, and like, and they'll play lawyer for the prosecution, right? And they will
Yeah.
beat you every time. So the exercise is basically to come up with some metaphor of yourself as a child. What were you like? What was life like for you? How did you experience life? And it could be childhood, it could be teenage years. It doesn't matter. Let's just say childhood. So let's say the person says, "I'm like a butterfly that's been pinned to a cork board." Now, for every metaphor that a person makes, there's going to be one level where that is literally true. There's something similar enough about that scenario to their life that there's almost a one-to-one connection. And so what is true about that? Oh, well, like I was put on display by my parents and to be admired, but I was completely trapped. Okay. So then you start going deeper into it. Like, chances are, because there's millions of metaphors a person could choose, chances are there's more than one reason that metaphor is true. So what else do you know about corkboards? What else do you know about pins? What else do you know about butterflies? What kind of butterfly is it? Is it a particular species? What shape are its wings? Like, you start getting into the layers of all the things they know about that object that they've used for the metaphor, and suddenly it turns out to be true on like 10 more levels that they never thought about. And that little episode of discovery is that self-knowledge piece, right? To know yourself, you have to know what you like, what you dislike, and what you were disallowed from liking and what you were disallowed from disliking as a child. What were your intrinsic instincts? Like, what shape did the tree want to grow in, actually? And what were the concrete boxes put around it that forced it to become a completely other shape than what it wants to be? And so later in life, it's like, okay, who am I anyway? Why do I hate my life so much? Well, because you're bent into this shape that you were never meant to be. So let's figure out what shape you are. Well, how do I do that now? This is just one way of doing that, right? And so, if, for example, if this company were a vehicle, what vehicle would it be? How is it driven? What's the motor? How is it efficient or not efficient? Is it a utility vehicle? Like, what kind of terrain can it handle?
Who's in
Um,
it?
who's in it? What features does it have? Like, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So that sort of institutional self-knowledge can be increased in a way, like, yeah,
Yeah.
so the mirror is not just about this is what you're like and this is what I see and here's the
Yeah.
reports and here's the
Yeah.
statistics. It's also
Yeah.
functioning.
In
Yeah,
those other areas as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
So I want to point out something about myself in conversations with people over the years is that I have to translate from images to words a lot of the time because my brain is continually metaphorical. It's just like that. And and so I can say 100% with what you're saying, like to think of a company as a vehicle. Which vehicle? Is it electric? Is it gas? Is it diesel? Is it an aircraft? What the heck is it anyhow? And what's it do?
How many miles before it gets serviced?
Oh man, it's just a perfect metaphor for organizations. For individuals, the butterfly is, a really good metaphor because it comes out of a worm and it becomes a cocoon and it goes through these stages, etc. It's and there's multiple types of butterflies, something like 27,000 varieties of butterflies. Anyway, I just can't help but say this because I'm so familiar with this, and yet I come into contact with people who never seem to know what that is like as a mental state. It's always linear or it's whatever.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
It's a tough one for
Well,
people.
the okay, so first of all, the word metaphor could be itself an obstacle, right? Like,
Yeah, it could be.
so if you
You don't say it's
okay,
metaphor.
well, no, but like, I mean, here's an example. Um, my youngest daughter really likes animals and likes to wear a fox tail and kind of feels like she's a
A fox.
fox,
Yeah.
right? That's a metaphor. And so you can ask someone, well, what's your spirit animal? That's another way of asking the same question. Or what's your like there's so many different ways of asking the question other than using the word metaphor. Um,
Yeah, and the great thing about it is people can talk so freely about it because it's external. Like, we've got sand in the engine and they've got something in mind, but they don't have to, put it on paper. They can
yeah.
they can fully vent their frustration or whatever.
I think one of the challenges though, excuse me, is like what you're talking about is that for you, metaphors are visual and they're immediate and they're what's the right word? There's really easy. And I think for some people at least, they're not immediate, they're not easy, and they're not necessarily visual, right? Like I don't have right these days, I mean, when I was young, it was better, but these days I don't have a very strong visual internal system,
Yeah,
right?
they
Like
don't have
I
to be visual.
no,
So
I know,
just
I know.
for instance,
Yeah.
there's a lot of neuropsychology research where they do brain imaging scans, and they'll compare phrases like um, "your presentation was a success" or "your presentation was a great success," and they'll compare that phrase to "your presentation was a home run," and the phrase "home run" instantly engages all the emotional centers of the brain in a way that the regular language does not, even though language is already metaphorical. So it doesn't have to be stated. It just so happens that if you want emotional engagement, metaphor is a great way to get there.
Yeah, actually, where I was going with that though is that like dad said something specific, which is about visual. When you talk to people with language, like you were saying, Alexi, is that like all of language is already a metaphor, period, full stop. Like
It
every
is.
single
Yeah,
letter,
really.
every
And
it's
that's clear about how makes that like one letter.
yeah.
If
So that ability of the mind to connect some thing that's like a concept to another concept, that connection is always a metaphor. And then like in art, right? Like every piece of art that's in this studio is suggestive. There's like whether it's the colors or the
Shapes.
composition, the shapes, the
Oh, yeah.
whatever, like all of that is metaphor, period, full stop. Like there's even if you were to do the most perfect, realistic replication of
A
a
thing.
scene, a thing, it's still a metaphor.
Yeah.
Um,
Because it's two-dimensional, not three-dimensional.
but not even just for that
It's
reason.
it's
It's just
it's not just because it's a part of it or the whole thing or anything else.
right. So the thing that's interesting is that like the framework that you've got, Alexi, is composed of these different parts. Where I am sort of excited and interested is actually that, you put metaphor last, but in some ways it's also first, right? Like because it's so fundamental to how humans think, period. Right? Like there's like it's just everything.
Yeah. And it's really obvious when you start trying to talk to a creature that doesn't have that capacity, like a dog, for example.
Chat GPT.
Yeah, or whatever. It's just not the same
Yeah.
experience at all. Yeah.
So I think given how long we've been talking about this stuff, it's maybe time to wrap up. But I would like to ask if it's convenient for you to share your screen with the little chart, just so that it can be also seen in the metaphor of words and symbols, and in a uh, what you call it, a proprioceptive structure relationship, like a layout. Um, because I think that would also be helpful for understanding it. And then maybe we can sort of say some concluding words, each of us, after the visual presentation has concluded. You're muted. You are muted.
It's okay.
Yeah, let me share the right thing here.
Okay.
Okay. Is that the one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just let me make this a little bit. Okay. So basically, yeah, this is love, perception, self-educative, metaphorical, narrative across the top. And then the first row is basically therapeutic modalities that I think particularly rely on these faculties to achieve change. Almost all of them are used by just the concept of talk therapy in general. Like
Mhm.
the whole idea of two people sitting down and talking through a problem, it's ancient, right?
Yeah.
It's not new. And then the specific interventions like informed consent, for example, is just this really fundamental ethical principle of making sure that everything you're doing is with the full cooperation and agreement of the client, and that shows respect. It shows love. There's many. So
Yeah.
I just laid out not all interventions because there's thousands of them, but just some typical ones. Like, for example, almost every CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy intervention, has to do with um, reality testing, cognitive distortions, exposure to feared objects in a graduated way. That's all that perception faculty. Like let's go look at reality instead of staying in our imagination and our feared reality. And then self-educative, like stuff like I don't. Do you know what metacognition is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mirroring, modeling, in vivo exposure, reality testing, dream work, journaling, all that
Yeah.
stuff. There's lots of really effective ways that these things can be used, and I think the reason that all these things work is because people have these intrinsic faculties, and if we didn't have them, and it's almost so obvious to say, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, how obvious is this? But where this comes from is just the idea of I mean, it's really from religion. It's like yeah,
Look at how many pimples I have.
I'll look later. Um it's like for me this started with kind of realizing one day, wow, it's really amazing that there's 1.3 billion Muslims and the only thing that they have to go on is a book that ultimately boils down to narratives and metaphors. And that's enough to inspire civilization, devotion, dedication, community, ritual, practice, culture, art, like everything. So that's got to be pretty powerful. And then the other stuff kind of came along. It's like, well, how else does God reveal himself? Through the force of love. I veiled in my inmost being. And anyway, I knew my love for thee, hence I created thee. And then the idea that we have been created in God's image, which means that whatever faculty we use to know ourselves is one of the ways that we come to know God. And then perception, basically, the book of creation is part of God's revelation. So as we perceive reality, we come to know God. So yeah, love, metaphor, narrative, perception, and self educative. I mean, there could be more. I just haven't seen what they would be yet.
Other than those five, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I mean, it starts with this religious premise: we've been created to know and love God. How do we do that? Like, God gave us all the different forms of revelation, but also gave us the capacity and faculties to receive it. So, what are those faculties? And, well, that's how you progress, that's how you grow.
Well,
That's the idea.
I think, that's what Gate of the Heart is about. The book, soul, heart, spirit, and body, those four core gifts to human beings. That's for the individual, and that's pretty interesting. And they're all mysteries in certain ways.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways of slicing it. Like you could say there's two kinds of clouds, and that would be true in a sense, right? There's fog, and then there's everything up there. But you could also say there's five kinds of clouds or 100 kinds of clouds. Like anyway, you could slice it by different, um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
criteria.
So if I was to add a kind of final word on this, it's that the the author, Douglas Hofstadter, who's a cognitive scientist and computer scientist who has studied for decades how to model human thought, has really explored a lot of this stuff in some really incredible, inspiring ways. And he wrote this one book around the passing of his first wife, who died suddenly. And it's called Le Tombeau de Marot, which is the name of a French poem. And it's a three-way, um, uh, oh, shoots. What's it called when the same sounds have different meanings? Homonym? Anyway, um, so it's this beautiful book about translation. And it explores so many of these ideas about where are the boundaries around concepts? How do we know one thing is different than another thing? Or how do we know they're in the same category? How do we take that and apply it to understanding each other as humans? Um, and it's really, really quite beautiful. Anyway, um, so if I was to say my final word on this particular discussion, it's just that this is a really cool framework that you've come up with, and I think that it's like you said it's kind of obvious, but I think I don't know why I don't know what I'm doing to create balloons. So you said it's kind of obvious, but I don't think it is, right? I think it's easy to sort of say, well, I've created something simple, therefore it should be obvious, but actually simple isn't usually obvious, right? And it's sort of filling in those gaps and creating connections where people haven't necessarily seen connections before.
I think for myself, seeing this first and the second matrix that he'd given us opens a door to, it's like a snakes and ladders game of some kind. You could go up or you can go down, you can go around, you can go in and out. There I am thinking it's a beautiful system of options for a practitioner, for a person who's interested in these kind of things.
Yeah.
It opens the door in a way that I think in chemistry, that's what the periodic table did. It opened the door to investigate these atomic structures. And we are, in effect, structures that have these attributes. And this is what this matrix, these two matrices do. They open a door into that investigation and discovery.
Yeah.
So I think it's really exciting, Alexei.
Yeah, I'm pretty keen on it. For it to be a theory, it has to be able to explain things like uh, there's a list of things that a psychological theory basically has to touch on, like personality development. It has to have a theory of why mental illness exists, how it gets better, how you measure progress, how you measure health and ill health, and there's a bunch of different pieces. But I'm not. It's just kind of interesting to me to think of it in this way, and gives me like um, a way of being creative within therapy to help people.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what about this? And would you be willing to try something? Like, yes, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Perfect.
Cool, cool, cool. It's
Well,
late.
and it's just the start too, because you're on the verge of a threshold, and that to me is equally obvious.
Okay.
That's good.
Alexei, it's been a pleasure. And
You guys too.
yeah, I'm gonna stop the Zoom and yeah, we'll
And
do
I
this
feel
again.
honored to be included.
Oh, it's fun.
Okay.
Yeah, I do really kind of I think that there must be equivalents, but they may not be the same thing for communities. Like, so for, okay, let me give you, oh yeah, show me that in a minute. I want to get this thought properly. So again, like starting with the religious premise, it may be that the first way of coming to know and love God for a community is through unity, as a for instance. So unity might be the equivalent for a community of something like love is for an individual.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Similarly, what's another one? Practice. Another one could be law. Like there could be other things for community that matter more for entering into a relationship with the creator than they do for a single individual, because it might be a different beast slightly, and I haven't
Yeah.
really thought through it yet.
And I think that's worthwhile to do, and to also think of it in terms of, like, because this is all about talk therapy, to also think about it in terms of visual therapy, or right, like when you have a framework like this, often it can be extended and jump disciplines, basically. Like we were talking a lot about organizational coaching, for example, as a discipline jump. But there's another discipline here, which is art, and there's probably many more as well. Okay, so I really do want to stop the recording at least